Salvete discipuli, hodie spectatis lecturam 12º capitis triginta octo. Relative clauses of characteristic, dative of reference, supines. Hodie discemus. Primum vocabula capitis triginta octo. Dende grammaticam capitis. We'll learn relative clauses of characteristic, which is essentially the relative pronoun plus the subjunctive. The kind of X that would do Y. We also learned about supines. Mirabile dictu means wonderful to say. Dictu is a supine. We'll talk more about that later. Hodie discemus, or primum discemus, verba vocabularum capitis triginta octo. In hoc capite sunt sex verba: impedio, metuo, queror, recognosco, suspendo, vendo. Primum verbum: impedio, impedire, impedivi, impeditum. Iter a snorlace immoto impeditor. Quid significat impedio? Proximum verbum: metuo, metuere, metui. Oderint dum metuant, inquit Caligula imperator. Quid significat metuo? Proximum verbum: queror, queri, questus sum. Senes saepe de rebus lebibus queruntur. Quid significat queror? Proximum verbum: recognosco, recognoscere, recognovi, recognitum. Istum recognosco. Eheu, ego sum ille insanus. Quid significat recognosco? Proximum verbum: suspendo, suspendere, suspendi, suspensum. Gladius Damoclis super caput meum suspenditor. Quid significat suspendo? Ecce Damocles, ecce Gladius. Ultimum verbum: vendo, vendere, vendidi, venditum. Hac machina potiones carbonatae venduntur. Quid significat vendo? Nunc discemus nomina vocabularum capitis triginta octo. In hoc capite sunt octo nomina: arbor, dignitas, dolor, odium, opus, oratio, pes, sator. Primum nomen: arbor, arboris. Ecce arbor. Quid significat arbor? Proximum nomen: dignitas, dignitatis. Cum multa facta fortissime gesisset, militi plurimum dignitatis est. Quid significat dignitas? Proximum nomen: dolor, doloris. Medici semper rogant quantum dolorem patientes sentiant. Quid significat dolor? Proximum nomen: odium, odii. Cato maior odium erga Carthaginienses saepe praestitit. Quid significat odium? Proximum nomen: opus, operis. Johannes Sebastianus Bacchus, ille compositor Germanicus, plurima opera pulcherrima composuit. Quid significat opus? Proximum nomen, oratio, orationes. Cicero orationem suam in Catilinam incipit. Quid significat oratio? Ecce Cicero, ecce Catilina, ecce Senatus. Proximum nomen, pes, pedis. Ecce pedes felis. Ecce pedes felini. Quid significat pes? Ultimum nomen, sator, satoris. Semina in humo a satore seruntor. Quid significat sator? Ecce semina, ecce humus, ecce manus satoris. Quid significat sator? Nunc discemus adjectiva vocabulorum capitis triginta octo. In hoc capita sunt sunt quinque adjectiva: firmus, infirmus, mirabilis, pristinus, sublimis. Proxima adjectiva: infirmus, infirma, infirmum, et firmus, firma, firmum. Ecce homo firmus, et ecce homo infirmus. Quid significant infirmus et firmus? Proximum adjectiva: mirabilis, mirabila. Monumenta pristina Athenis sunt mirabilia vissu. Quid significat mirabilis? Proximum adjectivum: pristinus, pristina, pristinum. Monumenta pristina Athenis sunt mirabilia vissu. Quid significat pristinus? Proximum adjectivum: sublimis, sublime. Olympus mons tam sublimis est, ut Graeci crederent eum Deis domum esse. Quid significat sublimis? Nunc discemus alias partes loquendi vocabulorum capitis triginta octo. In hoc capite est una conjunctio, etsi, una praepositio, erga, et unum adverbium, libenter. Sola conjunctio, etsi. Etsi rex anglorum essem, feles esse libenter malem. Quid significat etsi? Sola praepositio, erga. Cato maior odium erga Carthaginienses saepe praestitit. Quid significat erga? Solum adverbium, libenter. Etsi rex anglorum essem, feles esse libenter malem. Quid significat libenter? Okay, for the first part of this grammar lesson, we're going to refer to a famous one-liner from Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. delivered by Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan Kenobi there. And we're going to use it in order to teach us the concept of relative clauses of characteristic. In other words, another subordinate clause taking the subjunctive. Okay? Now, a relative clause of characteristic is a type of relative clause. So far, we have learned relative clauses as the only subordinate clause that takes the indicative rather than the subjunctive. Okay? So let's review relative clauses. Okay? A relative clause is a relative pronoun plus the indicative. So Obi-Wan Kenobi famously said, "These are not the droids you're looking for." Or you could more precisely say it, "These are not the droids that you're looking for," though in English we can drop out the that. In Latin, the precise translation would be, "He non sunt droides quos petitis." Okay? So you have to put the relative pronoun in the Latin version of this line. Okay, so these are not the droids which or that you are looking for. Okay, so again, a relative pronoun. Okay, we have our main clause, our independent clause, and then a relative pronoun which sets off a dependent clause, a subordinate clause. Okay, that has its own verb, and we know that a relative clause, a regular relative clause, the verb is normally indicative, petitus, that's indicative. Now, what's the difference between that and a relative clause of characteristic? Well, a relative clause of characteristic looks the same, except the verb in the relative clause is subjunctive, okay? And when you put it in the subjunctive, it changes its meaning, okay? And it looks something like this. He non sunt droides quos petatis. Okay? These are not the sort or the kind of droids that you're looking for. These aren't the sort of droids you're looking for. Okay? So notice the difference between a regular relative clause and a relative clause of characteristic. Okay? It's telling you that you're using the subjunctive to talk about generalities, okay, rather than specifics. Okay? Remember that the indicative mood is for statements of fact. Okay, these are not the droids that you are looking for. Okay, that's a statement of fact. These are not the kind of droids you're looking for. Okay, that's a statement of something more general. Okay, that is getting into hypotheticals, and which is, subjunctive territory. Okay, so these are not the kind of droids you're looking for. Is what is indicated when you switch to the subjunctive in your relative clause. Okay, petatis, that's a present subjunctive. We beat a giant liar. It's a third conjugation verb. We have the a there. Okay, so that's basically how it works, right? So instead of saying the thing which does the thing, it's the kind of thing that does the thing, right? That's something different. Okay. Here's another example. And in fact, this is an example of a phrase that could be translated into Latin in multiple ways, each with a different subtle type of meaning. Okay, so let's take kind of the meme phrase, "I see what you did there." Okay, well, I could translate this as a regular relative clause with the indicative. Okay, video quod fecisti. I see that which you have done, right? Which means I can see the exact same thing that you have exactly done, right? A statement of fact. But I could translate this into a relative clause of characteristic. Video quod feceris. Okay, notice that I'm using the perfect subjunctive here rather than the perfect indicative, okay, because sequence of tenses, right? I see what you did there, or more precisely, I see the kind of thing you did, the type of thing you did there, right? You could also possibly translate this as an indirect question. Video quid feceris. I see what you did there. Okay. In other words, I'm treating it as an indirect question. I see, though the head verb there, you probably want something that asks more of a question. But technically, you could translate this as an indirect question, and I wouldn't split hairs over it. But generally, the first two things are a bit clearer. So when you say "I see what you did there," are you saying "I see the exact thing that you have done there," or are you saying "I see the kind of thing that you've done there"? Okay, those are two different things that you could interpret that phrase as, and in Latin you can have a more precise translation of it. Okay, so hopefully that clears things up, or maybe makes things more confusing. I don't know, but you see what I did there. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about in this lecture that's in the grammar is the supine. Supines are fun. They're cool. You don't see them a lot, but when you see them, you spot them and say, "Hey, that's a supine. That's cool." You don't see that a lot. Okay, so here's how you spot them. Okay, a supine is a type of noun formed from a verb. Okay, we've dealt with participles, which are types of adjectives formed from verbs. Well, a supine is a noun formed from a verb. Okay, and it's not the only noun that will form from a verb, as we'll see in later chapters. Okay, so basically, here's how it works. You take the fourth principal part and you turn it into a fourth declension noun. Okay, so let's take video, videra, vidi, visum. Okay, you take that fourth principal part, visum, and you turn it into a fourth declension noun. Visus, visus, right? Now, in what context do you use it? Well, you only use it in very specific contexts. Okay, you will only use it in the accusative or ablative. Okay, if you use it in the accusative, you're using it to express purpose, and often with a verb of motion. Okay? So here's an example Latin sentence. Ibo Philadelphiam familiam visum. Okay? Which means, I'll go to Philly to see my family. Okay? So Ibo, I will go, verb of motion, to Philadelphia, right? Accusative place to which, and it's a proper name of a city, so I don't need the preposition. Familiam visum. Okay, here is the supine of video being put into the accusative, and this is a fourth declension accusative, and it's indicating purpose, and of course, and here it's also taking its own direct object, which is fine. So I'll go to Philly to see my family. Okay, so that's how you use it with the accusative, to express purpose, usually with a verb of motion. You can also use in the ablative to express respect to an action. Okay, what the hell does that mean? Let's use an example from from a couple of the vocab sentences, actually. Okay, monumentum Athenis sunt mirabilia visu. Okay, the monuments in Athens are marvelous to see or wonderful to behold, however you want to translate that. Okay, so by the way, I used this is often used with a verb to be construction, so a predicate construction with some sort of adjective. Okay, so wonderful to see, crazy to say, difficult to say, those sorts of types of things. Okay, notice I used the locative here with a place name, in case you wanted to see how those work. So the monuments in Athens are wonderful to see. So I have a predicate adjective, mirabilia, okay, wonderful, marvelous, and then I have visu, which is the supine of video in the ablative, visu, fourth declension ablative. Okay, so it's literally, they are wonderful by means of seeing or by seeing, but in better English, wonderful to see. Okay, they're wonderful if you see them, right? They're wonderful by means of the act of seeing, okay, is about as literal a meaning as you can get here. But wonderful to see is the proper English, okay? A common supine phrase you'll see in Latin is mirabile dictu, wonderful to say, or difficile dictu, difficult to say. Okay, so that's dico, dicere, dixi, dictum. Okay, dictum turned into a supine. Mirabile or difficile dictu, okay, is difficult to say or difficult by saying. Okay, so that's the two ways you'll see the supine work in Latin. And again, it's uncommon, but it's kind of neat when you see it. Okay, so that's it, and I will see you next time. Valete discipuli.